Records were broken, hearts were in mouths, and decisions were questionable this weekend in Monza. So I asked you for your hottest takes from the 2023 Italian Grand Prix, and the amount of capsaicin on show was incredible. Verstappen getting 10 wins in a row puts him in the conversation for the best of all time. Now, I know this might be a little bit early, but on the list of Formula One records and achievements, this is just right up there for me. Getting past Sebastian Vettel's 9 wins in a row is just astonishing. Okay, he's only going to end up with 3 Drivers' Championships after this season. He hasn't got the longevity of a Hamilton, Alonso, or a Schumacher as of yet, but I think just the fact that he's got this 10 wins in a row shows that he has something incredible. Like the consistency that he's had to show over the last 10 Grand Prix, the fact that he delivers every single weekend and gets the most out of that car every single weekend. Also, the teamwork, the fact that he works with the Red Bull team so closely that they set up the car perfectly for him every single weekend. They get the strategy right, they get the pit stops right, and they're almost spiraling into this. They can't get anything wrong at this point. And you think about Lewis Hamilton and the Mercedes dominance that he had. I think he only ever managed 5 wins in a row. And I know it's different circumstances and different championships, and this Red Bull car looks so much better than any of the Mercedes cars that we saw, in my opinion. But I think just the fact that he's been able to do it and the level that Max Verstappen is showing right now in this season, we're going to be talking about for years and years to come. And I think that puts him in the bracket of the elite drivers. On the flip side of that, David has said Max had a poor weekend. Yes, he won, but that is already baked in and as expected. No pole, did not lead every lap, no fastest lap, and only topped the timesheet in 1 free practice session. It definitely wasn't the grand slam that we've become accustomed to this season from Max Verstappen. You know, we almost expect him to be top of every single session, pole position, win the race fairly comfortably by like 20, 30 seconds. Whereas this weekend was maybe a little bit more difficult for the Red Bull. I think they are aware that the Mercedes, Ferraris, McLarens of this world are getting quicker, are getting closer to the Red Bull package. And it reminded me a little bit of the Red Bull last year, where Ferrari got pole position so many times over the course of the season. We often saw Charles Leclerc getting pole positions, but the Red Bull car was set up a little bit more for the race. And I think because this track really doesn't suit the Red Bull car, obviously we've heard so much about the DRS of the Red Bull being their main thing going this season, and the fact that they can get past cars really easily in those DRS zones. They couldn't really do that this time around, so I think they had to kind of move the car a little bit more towards a racing package. It reminded me that they can be adaptable. They still take into account the other teams, even though they are so dominant. And I'm not sure we can call it a poor weekend, but definitely not as dominant as they have been this season. Polish Eddie, Ferrari boys almost gifted Russell a podium. It was quite scary to see the 2 Ferraris really going at it all the way until the end of the Grand Prix, but I think the Leclerc lockup on the final lap is the thing that people are going to come back to. But actually, Leclerc could have taken Sainz out of the Grand Prix 3 or 4 times over the course of those last few laps. It was very heart in mouth, I imagine, for all of the Tifosi that were there, but more so for the Ferrari team, who finally had a good race, finally looked like obviously the second fastest car, and then could have wiped out a 3rd and 4th place finish fairly quickly. But I had a feeling that it was going to happen, because if you think about the podium at Monza as a Ferrari driver, that must just be the most incredible feeling, and nothing that can replicate that. I think getting a podium at Monza as a Ferrari driver, I mean, Charles Leclerc had that in 2019 where he got the win in front of the Tifosi. I just can't even imagine how that would feel with the crowd behind you. It's by far and away the best podium of the season that you can get if you're a Ferrari driver. And I don't think anything was going to convince Charles Leclerc that he wasn't going to go for that podium position. Josh Swain, the FIA are not harsh enough and should punish drivers more for ruining someone's race. Russell getting 5 seconds for running someone off the track, fair. But Hamilton ruining Oscar's race and getting 5 seconds, not harsh enough. I kind of agree with this, actually. I think it's something that Formula One does struggle with a little bit. It's difficult to know how and when to penalise drivers, and we don't have perfect consistency over the course of the entire season because the stewards do change race from race. Obviously, there are those consistent people there from the FIA, but generally speaking, we do see some decisions go one way and then the same decision go a slightly different way a few races later. Is one of those things that Formula One will always have, and generally sports always have. But both of the Mercedes cars did pick up penalties. First and foremost, I think we should say that both of those penalties were justified. But I think if you look at one, it's for gaining time on track, right? Like George Russell got in front of Esteban Ocon, didn't really cost Esteban Ocon that much, but obviously gained massively because he didn't have to follow Esteban Ocon for another couple of laps, and that gained him the time that then the FIA took off him, that 5 seconds at the end. Whereas the other was banging into an opponent, taking them off the track and completely ruining their race by damaging their car. And should the effect that your influence has on the other driver be taken into account? It's an interesting one to kind of debate. I do think the fact that both of those things warranted a penalty is good, but both of those things warranting the same penalty is a bit of a grey area. Which actually leads on to Thomas saying, what happened to drive-through penalties? Why are they not a thing anymore? And I actually had a look. So I took this into my account. I went to Article 54.3 of the FIA regulations, did my homework on this, and they have 5-second, 10-second drive-through and 10-second stop-and-go penalties at their disposal. They're the 4 types of penalties that can be given out by the FIA during a race, and they're designed to cost the drivers 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 20 seconds, or 30 seconds. Because if you can't basically have that penalty, so if you can't do the drive-through because it's the final lap of the Grand Prix, it's supposed to cost you about 20 seconds. If you can't do the 10-second stop and go, it's supposed to cost you about 30 seconds. So that's the way the penalties are designed. But I do agree, we don't really see those bigger penalties anymore. And obviously, all of this is at the steward's discretion. They're just the tools that the stewards have. Whether or not they implement them is completely up to the individual that's in the box on that day. But it would be nice to see, maybe if there is something like the Lewis Hamilton incident that costs Oscar Piastri so much, like it's cost McLaren points at the end of the day, whereas Mercedes, you can say that 5-second penalty for Lewis Hamilton didn't really cost him anything. He was going to come 6th place anyway. Would he have, come 6th place with a 20-second, 30-second penalty? No. So maybe there is something where the FIA can have a little look at that and maybe take those incidents and the actual ramifications of those incidents into account a little bit more. Apex says, Williams has a very fast car and Albon is just a mid-driver. That is a spicy, spicy take that I can't really agree with. I'm sorry. I'm all over the Alex Albon hype train right now. What was it? His best finish of the season in Monza, equaling that 7th place finish in Canada that he got earlier on in the season. And I just think when he's in that Williams car, his defensive positioning and the fact that he uses the straight line speed advantage of that Williams to defend so well is just incredible to watch. And I think the team and I just absolutely love him. I think the problem for Alex Albon right now is he's got the teammate problem, right? Since he's been at Williams, we've compared him to Nicholas Latifi, who is nowhere near Formula One quality, and now a rookie in Logan Sargent, who is really struggling to adapt to Formula One. David says, livery upgrades also improve performance, confirmed once again. Of course, both Ferrari and Alfa Romeo brought special liveries this weekend, and both had really good weekends. What was it? The best Ferrari performance in a very long time. But I think we should focus on Alfa Romeo, because Alfa Romeo surprised me. Valtteri Bottas surprised me, getting points. Okay, it was only 10th place and 1 point, but he's only scored 1 point in the last 12 races before that. That was a 10th place in Canada as well. Maybe Canada is just really like Monza and I haven't noticed those parallels before. But Alfa Romeo, they did really well. They nailed the strategy with Valtteri Bottas. He went on the same strategy as Lewis Hamilton and was on those fresh tyres right at the end. Okay, they got a little bit lucky in the fact that Oscar Piastri obviously dropped out of the points because he was taken out by Lewis Hamilton. But you've got to be there. You've got to be in 11th place to take that position. And Valtteri Bottas did really well. So basically what we're saying is Alfa Romeo need a couple of other liveries because this one was absolutely fantastic. So I'm definitely up for Alfa Romeo having some more liveries. And therefore, they'll be able to take over Haas in the constructors' standings. Next up's Jamie Dawson. Unless we see more points spread to the rest of the grid, Formula One will lose supporters for the smaller teams. And I actually completely agree with this. I think the fact that only 1st to 10th gets points isn't quite right, especially this season in particular, where it's been so competitive from like second place all the way back to 15th, 16th place at times. Often you see drivers really battling for 13th or 12th place, and it kind of feels like they deserve something for it, because at the end of the day, if you come 11th or 20th, it doesn't really matter. And you see these drivers driving really, really hard, getting 11th place, and then just someone who finished 20th, 50 seconds off everybody else gets the same amount of points. It doesn't quite seem fair. You know, IndyCar gives points to everybody on the grid. MotoGP gives top 15 riders, I want to say, points. So I'd like to see a point system that spreads out a little bit more and gives a little bit more leeway to those guys that actually finish the Grand Prix. I think you should be rewarded for finishing a Grand Prix in some way or another. And I think it would just make, especially that back of the pack, as you talk about, the Williams down in the Constructors' Championship right now, a lot more competitive. I think if we look at Haas and Alfa Romeo and AlphaTauri as well, Yuki Tsunoda came 11th so many times, and that's not really reflected in the constructor standings at all. It's just the fact that Haas have had 2 or 3 really good finishes, and that's kind of carrying them all the way through the season. I don't think that the point system right now for those guys at the back of the grid is an actual meritocracy. I think they're just waiting for one Grand Prix where they can get a ridiculous position because maybe something crazy happens at the front. And then you've got like Nico Hülkenberg on 9 points and Yuki Tsunoda on 3, where I don't think Nico Hülkenberg has been that much better than Yuki Tsunoda this season. Boneless Watermelon, the biggest threat to Logan Sargent's career isn't Mick, isn't Vesti, isn't Palou, or any of the rumoured replacements. It's Liam Lawson. And I quite like this. Logan is under real pressure right now. Monza was supposed to be the big chance. You know, we saw Nick De Vries get points here last year. Alex Albon looked really competitive in 7th place. It looked like Logan Sargent should have probably done quite a lot better than he did. Finished in at 13th place behind Oscar Piastri, who managed to crash into everyone at the end of the Grand Prix. And also behind Liam Lawson. Liam Lawson has outperformed Sargent in both of the races that they have been in together. And actually, that 11th place finish from Lawson in his 2nd Grand Prix, again, if the points were slightly different, would have been rewarded. If Williams are looking to replace Logan Sargent, I think they should definitely have a chat to Liam Lawson, considering how good their ex-Red Bull Alex Albon is going. Maybe an ex-Red Bull Liam Lawson will go as well. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked this, for a more in-depth race review, click this link here, and I'll see you over there.